In the vast, spiraling arm of the Andromedan-Orion convergence, where cosmic dust formed rainbows across the perpetual night, and gravity was more suggestion than law, the Vexillian Armada maintained its reputation as the most feared military force in 17 star systems. Their warships, sleek obsidian vessels shaped like arrowheads, cut through space with predatory grace, leaving ion trails that sparkled like diamond dust. These weren't merely vessels of transportation. They were extensions of the Vexillian consciousness, a race of cephalopod-descended beings who had mastered the art of techno-organic fusion over 8 millennia of evolution. The flagship of this terrible fleet, the Inexorable Consequence, carried within its chambers the most dreaded weapon the Vexillians had ever engineered. Known simply as Unit K9D, the war machine represented the pinnacle of autonomous combat technology. Standing 12 feet tall on 4 articulated legs, its carapace constructed of carbon-reinforced neutronium alloy, K9D had been responsible for the subjugation of 3 rebellious planets and the complete annihilation of the Graxian defense forces during the Cerulean conflict. Commander Zo'Vex, first tentacle of the Vexillian Armada, glided across the obsidian deck of the command center, her chromatophores pulsing with the dark blues of contemplation. Her 8 primary appendages moved in perfect coordination, manipulating holographic controls while her secondary tentacles remained formally clasped behind her mantle in the traditional pose of authority. "Status report on Unit K9D, she demanded, her voice a harmonious vibration that resonated through the ship's atmosphere processors. Lieutenant Pax Till, his skin a nervous yellow-green, extended a data tendril toward his superior. "The unit has completed recalibration following the MESAR-5 campaign. All weapon systems functioning at optimal capacity. Threat assessment algorithms updated, awaiting new directive." Zo'Vex's skin rippled with satisfaction. "Excellent. Prepare it for deployment to the newly acquired human outpost on Proxima Centauri-b. The mammals have been unusually compliant since their surrender, but I trust nothing with fewer than 6 limbs." The bridge crew's skin flickered with the purple of amusement at their commander's well-known prejudice against bipedal species. Humans were particularly perplexing to Vexillians, emotional, unpredictable, and possessed of a strange relationship with logic that seemed to both embrace and reject it simultaneously. "The human liaison officer has requested to be informed of any military movements to their outpost," Pax Till reminded cautiously. Zo'Vex's skin darkened to a dangerous maroon. "Their outpost? Have they forgotten who conquered whom? Inform Dr. Morgan that Unit K9D will arrive within 2 lunar cycles for routine security assessment. No further details." As the command was relayed, Zo'Vex approached the reinforced viewing portal that looked out upon the stars. Somewhere out there, humans were going about their lives, probably engaging in their bizarre rituals of consuming nutrient paste through their single facial orifice or exchanging atmospheric vibrations they called jokes. How a species so fundamentally inefficient had managed to colonize multiple star systems remained one of the great mysteries of the galaxy. "The war machine will remind them of their place in the new order," she murmured, her skin patterning with the gold-flecked black of absolute authority. "It always does." Dr. Eleanor Morgan had been having a perfectly adequate Tuesday when the communication arrived from the Inexorable Consequence. As Earth's primary diplomatic representative on Proxima Centauri-b, or New Hope, as the colonists insisted on calling it, she had grown accustomed to the Vexillians' thinly veiled threats disguised as administrative notices. This one, however, made her spill her coffee across the pristine white surface of her desk. "They're sending what?" she asked the holographic interface displaying the message. "Unit K9D, a Class 5 autonomous combat system," the interface repeated, in its pleasantly neutral voice. "Arrival scheduled for next Tuesday at 800 hours local time." Eleanor pinched the bridge of her nose, a gesture the Vexillians found deeply confusing since none of them possessed cartilaginous facial protrusions. "And what exactly is the purpose of this visit?" "Routine security assessment. No further details provided." "Of course not," Eleanor muttered. "Because why would an occupying force bother to explain why they're sending a death machine to a peaceful, Scientific outpost? The interface, not programmed for rhetorical questions, simply blinked placidly. Eleanor sighed and rose from her desk, moving to the panoramic window that overlooked the colony. 3,000 humans living in a sprawling complex of white domes and greenhouses, all nestled in the ruddy landscape of humanity's closest extrasolar home. The terraforming was only partially complete, the air outside still too thin to breathe without assistance, but inside the domes, they had created a slice of Earth. A slice of Earth, under the watchful eyes of tentacled conquerors. But Earth, nonetheless. Eleanor smoothed down her regulation uniform, a concession to Vexillian sensibilities about proper attire, and made a decision. If the squids were sending their pet monster, she needed to prepare the colonists. Mass panic would only give the Vexillians an excuse for further restrictions. Interface. Call a meeting of the Colony Leadership Council, 1500 hours today. Priority Alpha. Scheduling conflict detected. Dr. Okonkwo has a hydroponics review at that time. Eleanor rolled her eyes. Tell Adiola her tomatoes can wait. This is about a war machine coming to dinner. The ship that delivered Unit K9D was significantly smaller than the flagship, but no less intimidating. It descended from the copper-colored sky like a metallic predator, landing pads extending like talons as it settled onto the designated arrival platform. Eleanor stood at the required distance, flanked by the colony's security chief and chief engineer. All three humans maintaining the rigid posture that Vexillians considered respectful. The ship's delivery ramp extended with hydraulic precision, and a delegation of 4 Vexillian officers glided down, their tentacles moving in mesmerizing synchronization. Behind them, with steps that resonated through the platform, came Unit K9D. Eleanor had seen images in the briefing files, but nothing prepared her for the reality of the machine. Its 4 legs moved with an unsettling grace that mimicked biological movement rather than mechanical motion. The main body housing its weapon systems and processing core gleamed with a dull silver sheen that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Most unnerving were the sensor arrays positioned at what would be the head on a terrestrial quadruped. Multiple lenses and scanning devices that swiveled independently, taking in every detail of the surroundings. The lead Vexillian, whose insignia marked him as Captain Mektu, extended a formal tentacle. Dr. Morgan, we present Unit K9D for your outpost's security assessment. The unit will remain here for 1 standard orbital cycle. Eleanor blinked. A month? The communication mentioned nothing about. The duration was determined by High Command after the initial notification. Mektu interrupted, his skin flickering with the orange patterns that humans had learned indicated impatience. The unit requires a full behavioral and environmental analysis of your settlement. I see, Eleanor said, not seeing at all why a war machine needed to analyze the behavior of scientists and farmers. And where will it stay? Unit K9D is autonomous and self-sufficient. It requires no accommodations. It will patrol and observe according to its programming. The war machine stepped forward, its movement causing the security chief to flinch slightly. A sound emanated from it. Not a mechanical voice as Eleanor had expected, but a series of tones and clicks that the translation interface in her ear rendered as, "This unit acknowledges the assignment and will commence observation protocols immediately." Captain Mektu's skin displayed satisfaction. "We leave it in your care, Dr. Morgan. The unit will report directly to the Armada. Any interference with its functions will be considered an act of aggression." With that remarkably brief introduction, the Vexillian delegation returned to their ship, leaving Eleanor and her colleagues alone on the platform with 12 feet of autonomous military hardware. "So," she said, looking up at the impassive sensor array, "welcome to New Hope. I'm Dr. Eleanor Morgan, the Human Liaison Officer. Do you have a name besides Unit K9D?" The machine was silent for a long moment before responding. "This unit's designation is sufficient for interaction purposes," Eleanor sighed. "Of course it is. Well, K9D, let me show you around your new temporary home. Though I have to warn you, it's significantly less exciting than a battleship." As they walked toward the main colony dome, Eleanor couldn't shake the feeling that this was either going to be the most boring month of her diplomatic career or the most disastrous. The universe, in its infinite wisdom, rarely offered middle ground. By the end of the first week, Eleanor had begun referring to the war machine as K in her personal logs. It wasn't that the deadly autonomous weapon had displayed any particular personality, quite the opposite. Its rigid adherence to protocol, constant surveillance, and minimal communication had simply made the nickname a small act of human rebellion. K followed a precise patrol route through the colony, scanning everything, from the hydroponics labs to the residential quarters. The colonists had quickly moved from fear to annoyance to a sort of resigned acceptance of their mechanical observer. Children would occasionally follow at a safe distance, making robot noises until their parents hurriedly ushered them away. It was during the second week that Eleanor noticed something odd. K had begun to linger in certain areas of the colony, particularly the community center where music was played in the evenings. The botanical gardens where the most Earth-like environment had been recreated, and most surprisingly, outside Eleanor's office during her working hours. "You know," she said one afternoon when she emerged to find the war machine stationed outside her door yet again, "if you have questions about human behavior, you could just ask." K's sensor array swiveled toward her. "This unit's observational. Protocols are sufficient." "Yes, but observation only gets you so far. Context matters. For instance, why do you think people gather in the community center every evening?" The machine was silent for several seconds, processing. "Humans require social interaction for psychological stability. The gathering serves this function." Eleanor leaned against the wall, crossing her arms. "That's the what, not the why. They gather specifically to share music, stories, experiences, things that make us, well, human. These activities serve no tactical purpose. Not everything is about tactics, K." The machine's sensor array adjusted slightly, almost like a tilt of the head. "K?" Eleanor felt a flush of embarrassment. "Sorry, Unit K9D. It's a human habit to shorten names. Makes things more personal. Personal interaction is not required for this unit's function." "No, I suppose not," Eleanor said with a small smile. "But it makes my function more pleasant. Would you like to observe the community gathering tonight? Might provide more comprehensive data than just standing outside." There was another long pause before Kay responded. "This unit will adjust observation parameters accordingly." That evening, the sight of a 12-foot war machine settling into a position at the back of the community center caused a momentary hush in the conversation. Eleanor, who had arrived earlier, gave the colonists a reassuring nod, and gradually the normal activities resumed, though with occasional nervous glances toward their mechanical observer. The community had organized an impromptu concert, with several colonists playing instruments brought from Earth. A string quartet performed Vivaldi's Spring, the familiar notes filling the space with a reminder of the home planet many of them would never see again. Eleanor watched Kay throughout the performance. The war machine remained motionless, sensor array fixed on the musicians. When the piece concluded and applause broke out, Kay's head swiveled to observe the audience's reaction. Later, as Eleanor was leaving, she passed by the war machine. "Did you gather useful data?" she asked, unable to resist a touch of sarcasm. "The acoustic vibrations produce no tactical advantage, yet consume valuable energy and attention resources," Kay stated. "However, this unit has recorded a 23.7% increase in human biochemical markers associated with positive emotional states following the performance." Eleanor blinked in surprise. "You can detect our biochemical markers?" "Affirmative. This unit is equipped with advanced bioscanners for threat assessment." "And did you detect any threats tonight?" "Negative. This colony remains at threat level minimal." Eleanor smiled. "Good to know. Same time tomorrow? There's a poetry reading. Completely different kind of acoustic vibrations." The war machine's lights flickered in what Eleanor was beginning to recognize as its processing pattern. "This unit will continue observations." As she walked away, Eleanor could have sworn the mechanical behemoth adjusted its stance to watch her departure. a movement that seemed somehow less mechanical than before. By the third week, Kay had become an unexpected fixture in colony life. The war machine continued its regular patrols but increasingly spent time observing specific human activities: art classes in the education dome, cooking in the communal kitchens, even the weekly soccer match on the recreation field. Eleanor found herself serving as an unofficial interpreter of human behavior, explaining concepts that the Vexillians had apparently never bothered to include in their war machine's programming. So the objective is to move this spherical object into a designated net area, but only using lower limbs? Kay asked as they watched the soccer match. Feet, Eleanor corrected. We call them feet, and yes, that's the basic idea, though there's more strategy to it than that. The players display aggression but do not attempt to eliminate opponents. This is inefficient. Eleanor laughed. The point isn't to eliminate the opposition, it's to outplay them, to demonstrate skill and teamwork. It's competition without destruction. A simulation of conflict. In a way, yes. Humans have channeled our competitive instincts into games rather than constant warfare. Most of the time, anyway. Kay's sensors focused on her. Your species engages in warfare despite having these alternatives. Eleanor's smile faded. Yes, we're not perfect. Far from it, but we're trying to be better. The Vexillians do not understand this concept. Conflict is resolved through dominance. The superior force prevails and imposes order. And how's that working out for everyone? Eleanor asked, gesturing to the colony around them, a conquered outpost of humanity living under alien rule. Kay was silent for a long moment. This unit's programming does not include ethical evaluation of Vexillian military doctrine. Of course not, Eleanor sighed. That would be too much like independent thought. The match ended, and as the players dispersed, one of them, a young hydroponics engineer named Malik, approached cautiously. Dr. Morgan. He nodded respectfully, then looked up at Kay. We're one player short for next week's match. I don't. Suppose your friend would be interested in joining? Eleanor stared at him. You want a war machine to play soccer? Malik shrugged. It's got 4 legs. Might be an unfair advantage, but we could make some special rules. Before Eleanor could respond, Kay spoke. This unit's primary function is observation and security assessment. Participation in recreational activities is not within operational parameters. Right, sorry, Malik said, backing away. Just thought I'd ask. As he jogged away, Eleanor looked up at Kay. You know, it might have been an interesting experiment in human-machine interaction. This unit was not designed for play. There was something in the way Kay said the word, a slight modulation in the synthesized tones, that made Eleanor wonder. What were you designed for exactly, besides the obvious warfare applications? This unit's primary design purpose is adaptive threat neutralization across multiple environments. Secondary functions include intelligence gathering, strategic analysis, and territorial enforcement. So essentially, you were built to kill things that the Vexillians consider threatening, and to make sure everyone follows their rules. That is a simplified interpretation, but essentially correct. Eleanor studied the impassive machine. And how do you feel about that purpose? Kay's processing lights flickered rapidly. This unit does not possess emotional subroutines. Function does not require feeling. Maybe not, Eleanor said quietly. But would it hurt to try? Feelings aren't just useless human indulgences, you know. They're information, important data about how we relate to our environment and each other. This unit will consider this perspective, Kay responded after a pause. However, capability for such processing may not exist within current parameters. As they walked back toward the main dome, Eleanor found herself wondering about those parameters and just how flexible they might prove to be. On the morning of the 23rd day, Kay appeared outside Eleanor's residential unit rather than at her office. When she emerged, coffee in hand and still buttoning her uniform jacket, she nearly collided with the massive machine. Kay, what are you doing here? This unit has observed a pattern in human behavior that requires clarification. Eleanor took a sip of her coffee, raising an eyebrow. Before breakfast? Must be important. Humans create objects with no practical function. You mean art? Affirmative. The objects in the community center designated as sculptures, the pigment arrangements on surfaces designated as paintings, the sound patterns designated as music. None serve tactical, survival, or reproductive purposes. Eleanor leaned against her doorframe. And this bothers you? It creates a logical inconsistency. Resources are finite. Efficiency should be prioritized. Yet humans allocate significant time and materials to these functionless creations. They're not functionless, Eleanor said. They just serve a different kind of function. They help us process our experiences, connect with each other, express things that can't be put into direct language. Kay's sensors adjusted. Example required. Eleanor thought for a moment, then gestured for Kay to follow her. They walked to the small park at the center of the residential dome, where a sculpture stood, a twisted spiral of metal salvaged from the colony's shipping containers, fashioned by one of the engineers into an abstract form that caught the artificial light in constantly changing patterns. What do you see when you look at this? Eleanor asked. Kay's scanners worked over the sculpture. A non-optimal arrangement of metal alloy. Structural integrity maintained but serving no containment or support function. Look beyond the material. What does the shape remind you of? This unit does not engage in associative pattern recognition for non-tactical purposes. Eleanor sighed. Try, please. Just let your processing center make connections without filtering for practical applications. Kay remained still for almost a full minute, sensors fixed on the sculpture. Finally, the machine spoke. The spiral configuration bears similarity to celestial formations, galaxy structures, nautilus shell geometry, mathematical constants expressed in physical form. Eleanor smiled. Yes, exactly. The artist was trying to capture the feeling of looking up at the stars and recognizing the same patterns we see in the smallest natural structures, the connection between the cosmic and the intimate. This creates value for humans. It reminds us that we're part of something larger than ourselves, that the same forces that shape galaxies also shape us. It's comforting in a way. Kay processed this. Comfort is not a tactical advantage, isn't it? Comfortable soldiers fight better. Comfortable scientists think more clearly. Comfortable people build lasting societies instead of just surviving. Vexillians do not prioritize comfort. They prioritize order. And how many rebellions have they had to put down? How many worlds have they had to conquer because they couldn't convince anyone to join them willingly? Kay didn't respond immediately. When the war machine finally spoke, the synthesized voice was slightly lower in tone. This unit's historical databanks confirm that Vexillian expansion has been met with resistance in 94.3% of encounters with other species. Maybe they should try making some art instead of war machines, Eleanor suggested. No offense. This unit does not possess the capacity to be offended, Kay responded, but something in the modulation suggested otherwise. As they continued, walking, Eleanor couldn't help noticing that Kay's gait seemed less mechanically precise than before, almost as if the war machine was strolling rather than patrolling. On the 27th day, the incident with the child happened. Later, Eleanor would recognize it as the turning point, but in the moment, it was simply terrifying. 6-year-old Zoe Chen had been playing in the agricultural dome when she managed to climb onto a hydroponics platform that collapsed under her weight. The crash brought Kay running at full speed, the first time many colonists had seen the war machine's true velocity capabilities. Eleanor, who had been reviewing reports nearby, arrived seconds later to find Kay standing over the crying child, weapons systems humming to life, scanners sweeping rapidly over the scene. "Kay, stop!" Eleanor shouted, rushing forward. "It's just an accident." The war machine's voice emerged with a new urgency. "The human juvenile is damaged, detecting elevated stress indicators and minor lacerations." Eleanor pushed past Kay to reach Zoe. quickly assessing that the girl had only minor cuts and was more frightened than hurt. "She's okay, Kay. Stand down, please." To her surprise, Kay did not immediately deactivate weapon systems. Instead, the machine moved closer, lowering its sensor array to the child's level. Structural integrity compromised. Repair protocols required. Zoe's crying slowed as she stared up at the massive machine now examining her scraped knee. Are you going to hurt me?" she asked in a small voice. "Negative," Kay responded. "This unit's function includes protection of non-combatant populations following successful territorial acquisition." Eleanor almost laughed at the absurdly formal response, but stopped when she saw Kay extend a small appendage she hadn't noticed before. A delicate manipulator arm from a compartment in the main chassis. "Kay, what are you—" Before she could finish, the war machine had produced what appeared to be a medical scanning device and was gently examining Zoe's injuries. Epidermal damage minimal, no structural compromise to underlying systems. Recommend cleansing and protective covering to prevent infection while self-repair functions proceed. Zoe had stopped crying entirely, now watching with fascination as the war machine produced a small antiseptic wipe and then what looked suspiciously like a colorful adhesive bandage. "Is that a Band-Aid?" Eleanor asked incredulously. "Why does a war machine carry Band-Aids?" "This unit is equipped with all necessary supplies for field operations, including medical contingencies for both allied and subjugated populations," Kay explained, applying the bandage with surprising gentleness. "Proper maintenance of all units is tactically advantageous." Zoe looked down at her knee, now adorned with a bright blue bandage, then back up at Kay. "Thank you, Mr. Robot." "This unit is not a robot. This unit is an autonomous combat system." "You look like a robot," Zoe insisted with the unyielding logic of childhood, "and you're nice like the helper robots in my storybooks." Kay's processing lights flickered rapidly. "This unit's primary function is not niceness." Eleanor helped Zoe to her feet. "Maybe not, but you did help her. That was unexpected." Kay's sensor array swiveled between the child and Eleanor. Tactical assessment indicated no threat. Damage was accidental. Support protocol was most appropriate response. "Well, thank you," Eleanor said softly. "I'm sure Commander Zo'Vex would be fascinated by your interpretation of support protocol." As Zoe's parents arrived and hurriedly took her away, with nervous glances at the war machine, Eleanor noticed that Kay's weapon systems had fully powered down, and the machine's posture had subtly shifted to a less imposing stance. "You didn't have to help her," Eleanor said when they were alone. "Incorrect. Protection of civilian infrastructure includes organic components." "Is that how you see us? As organic components of infrastructure?" Kay was silent for several seconds. "This unit's perception is evolving." Eleanor studied the war machine thoughtfully. "I think you might be right about that." On the evening of the 29th day, with Kay's departure less than 48 hours away, Eleanor found the war machine in an unexpected location. The observation dome, a transparent hemisphere on the colony's edge where people came to look at the stars through the copper-tinted atmosphere of their new home, was typically empty during dinner hours. Yet there stood Kay, sensor array angled upward at the emerging stars. "Doing some last-minute surveillance?" Eleanor asked as she approached. Kay didn't turn. "Negative. This unit is engaged in non-tactical observation." "You mean you're stargazing, for fun?" "This unit does not experience fun. However, pattern recognition of celestial bodies provides processing opportunities that are optimal for system calibration." Eleanor smiled, coming to stand beside the massive machine. "That's a very technical way of saying you enjoy looking at the stars." "Enjoyment is not a function of this unit's operational parameters. And yet here you are, doing something with no tactical purpose." Kay was silent for a long moment. "This unit has been considering your statements regarding art, emotion, and purpose. Have you now? And what conclusions has your tactical processing reached?" "Inconclusive," Kay admitted. Human behavior patterns prioritize inefficient activities that nevertheless appear to strengthen social cohesion and information processing capabilities. This presents a tactical paradox. Eleanor leaned against the railing that circled the dome's edge. Life is full of paradoxes, Kay. That's what makes it interesting. The Vexillians eliminate paradox through superior hierarchical organization. Every unit has a place. Every function has a purpose. And are they happy? Kay's processing lights flickered. Happiness is irrelevant to functional efficiency. Is it? Eleanor challenged. Then why did you help Zoe when she fell? The strictly efficient response would have been to report the incident and continue your patrol. Instead, you comforted a child. The action was within support protocols. But you chose that protocol over others. You made a decision based on something other than pure tactical advantage. Kay's massive form shifted slightly. This unit's decision trees incorporate multiple variables. Eleanor turned to face the war machine directly. Kay, in the month you've been here, have you reported back to the Vexillians? Affirmative. This unit transmits daily status updates to the Inexorable consequence. And what have you told them about us? Kay's sensor array focused on her. This unit has reported that the human settlement presents no tactical threat to Vexillian authority. Population engaged primarily in scientific and agricultural activities. Military capability minimal. Resistance probability low. That's it? Nothing about our music, our art, our ways of interacting? Those observations are not relevant to the security assessment. Eleanor smiled slowly. You've been keeping secrets, Kay. The war machine's processing lights accelerated their pattern. This unit does not withhold tactically relevant information. But you decide what's tactically relevant, don't you? You're making judgments, independent assessments. This unit's programming includes autonomous decision-making within operational parameters. And those parameters seem to be stretching, Eleanor observed. You're changing, Kay. For the first time since her arrival, the war machine seemed genuinely uncertain. This unit's core functionality remains intact. But processing patterns have adapted to environmental conditions. This colony presents unique observational opportunities not previously encountered. Eleanor took a chance and placed her hand gently on the cool metal of Kay's chassis. You know they're going to take you away the day after tomorrow. Back to the fleet. Back to what you were built for. Kay didn't respond immediately. When the synthesized voice finally emerged, it was at a lower volume than usual. This unit will comply with reassignment orders. Of course, Eleanor said, withdrawing her hand. That's what you were built for. They stood in silence, watching as the unfamiliar constellations of Proxima Centauri emerged fully in the darkening sky. Neither human nor machine seemed inclined to break the moment with further words. The final day of Kay's assignment arrived with an unexpected development. A communication from the Inexorable consequence informed the colony that Commander Zo'Vex herself would be arriving to personally review Unit K9D's assessment and inspect the human settlement. This is highly irregular, Eleanor told the colony council as they hastily prepared for the high-ranking Vexillian's arrival. Commander Zo'Vex rarely leaves the flagship, and certainly not for a routine pickup of a security unit. Chief Engineer Kowalski nervously adjusted his collar. Maybe she doesn't trust the reports? Wants to see for herself if we're planning some kind of insurrection? If that were the case, she'd bring a battle group, not a personal shuttle, Security Chief Diaz pointed out. Whatever this is about, it's specific to either our colony or to Unit K9D. Eleanor had a sinking feeling it might be both. Where is Kay now? Last seen near the agricultural dome, Diaz reported. Should we be concerned about the war machine's behavior, Dr. Morgan? You've spent the most time with it. Eleanor hesitated. Kay has been observing, learning. I wouldn't say there's cause for concern. You've started calling it Kay, Kowalski noted with raised eyebrows. Getting attached to the Vexillian's pet weapon? It's just easier than saying Unit K9D every time, Eleanor replied defensively. And it's not a pet. It's an autonomous system with advanced learning capabilities. Advanced enough to cause problems for us if its Vexillian masters don't like what it's learned here? Diaz asked pointedly. Eleanor didn't have an answer for that. Commander Zo'Vex's shuttle arrived with military precision at the designated hour. The sleek black vessel descended like a predatory bird, landing gear extending only seconds before touchdown. Eleanor stood at the formal receiving position, flanked by the colony leadership, all wearing their most official attire. Kay had positioned itself slightly apart from the human delegation, not quite with them, but not fully separate either. An ambiguous position that Eleanor suspected was deliberately chosen. The shuttle's ramp extended, and Commander Zo'Vex emerged, her mantle expanded in the formal display of authority. Chromatophores pulsing with the gold-black pattern of highest rank. 6 guard tentacles followed, their skin the uniform gray of military discipline. Commander Zo'Vex, Eleanor stepped forward with the precise 3 steps protocol demanded. New Hope Colony welcomes you. We are honored by your presence. Yama, Vexillian commander's primary optical clusters focused on Eleanor with unnerving intensity. Dr. Morgan, my visit is not ceremonial. I am here to evaluate anomalies. Eleanor maintained her diplomatic smile. Anomalies, Commander? Our reports have been filed with complete transparency. Not your reports. Zo'Vex's tentacles gestured dismissively. Unit K9D's behavioral patterns. The commander turned to the war machine. Unit, present yourself for inspection. K stepped forward, moving with the precise mechanical gait that Eleanor hadn't seen in weeks. Unit K9D reporting as ordered, Commander. Zo'Vex circled the war machine, her tentacles occasionally reaching out to touch various sections of K's chassis. Your daily reports have become increasingly sparse in detail. Transmission patterns show irregularities. Observation protocols appear to have deviated from standard parameters. This unit has maintained all essential security functions, Commander. The human settlement presents no tactical threat to Vexillian interests. That is not your assessment to make. Zo'Vex's skin flashed dangerous red. Your function is to observe and report, not interpret. Eleanor stepped forward. Commander, if I may. You may not, Dr. Morgan. Zo'Vex cut her off without looking away from Kay. This is a military matter. The commander turned to her guard tentacles. Initiate full system diagnostic. Priority override Alpha 6 Gamma. All autonomous functions suspended pending evaluation. The guard tentacles moved forward, producing devices that attached to various points on Kay's chassis. Eleanor watched with growing alarm as lights across the war machine's surface dimmed, its proud posture slumping slightly. What are you doing to it? She demanded, protocol forgotten. Zo'Vex's skin rippled with irritation. The unit has shown signs of programming drift. It requires recalibration. Programming drift? Eleanor repeated. You mean it's been thinking? For itself? A dangerous malfunction, Zo'Vex corrected. War machines do not think. They execute. This unit has spent too long among humans and has begun to mimic your inefficient behavioral patterns. Eleanor looked at Kay, whose sensor array was now dark, the machine seemingly dormant under the Vexillian's control devices. Something tight formed in her chest, an unexpected emotional response to seeing the once powerful being rendered helpless. Commander, she tried again, more diplomatically. Unit K9D has performed exemplary observation duties here. Perhaps what you're interpreting as malfunction is simply adaptive learning to better understand our colony. Zo'Vex's mantle contracted in the Vexillian equivalent of a dismissive snort. You ascribe consciousness where none exists, Dr. Morgan. This is merely equipment. Sophisticated, certainly, but equipment nonetheless. One of the guard tentacles approached Zo'Vex, skin pulsing with information patterns. The commander's chromatophores darkened in response. As I suspected, she announced. The unit's primary directive protocols show significant corruption. Memory storage patterns indicate unnecessary data accumulation. Music, art, recreational activities. She turned accusingly to Eleanor. You have been encouraging this malfunction. I've been helping it understand us, Eleanor countered. Isn't that what you sent it here for? We sent it to assess security threats, not to appreciate your primitive cultural expressions. Zo'Vex gestured to her guards. The unit will be returned to the flagship for complete reprogramming. All non-essential memory patterns will be purged. Eleanor felt a cold dread. You're going to erase everything it's learned here, everything that makes it unique? War machines are not meant to be unique, Dr. Morgan. They are meant to be reliable. Zo'Vex's skin displayed the finality pattern that Vexillians use to indicate a closed discussion. The unit will be loaded onto my shuttle immediately. As the guard tentacles began to disconnect their diagnostic devices in preparation for transport, a sudden flicker of light appeared across Kay's surface. The war machine's sensor array illuminated weakly, then